Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk about the new Tier 3 character guide featuring Jean Grey. In addition to that, I want to discuss a bit of a change up in the way that I want to rank Tier 3s, just particularly among each other, because I've been getting this question a lot more lately, and this year especially, we've gotten so many expensive Tier 3s. You know, last year we only had Deadpool, but this year we've gotten, Mr. Fantastic. We've gotten Wolverine, Thanos, and now Jean Grey. So 4 out of the 5 new Tier 3s have all been either 1200 CCF or, disgustingly, 1600 CCF. So it's really important to discuss the value of these characters amongst each others and really figure out what you want out of the character when you're thinking of taking them to Tier 3. Now, I know I don't have Jean Grey Tier 3 yet, and you don't need to remind me, and you might be asking yourself, well, Cynicalex, how are you supposed to give a ranking of Jean Grey Tier 3 if you don't have her? Well, listen, buddy, I have all the other Tier 3s that are relevant from this year: Mr. Fantastic, Captain Marvel, Wolverine, and Thanos. I haven't made a video featuring Thanos since he got his Tier 3, and despite not having Jean Grey Tier 3, I think I have a pretty good idea of where she fits in as one of the top Tier 3s, and I think it really is going to depend, especially considering her cost. And we are going to be taking cost into consideration for these Tier 3s, whether or not you should Tier 3 her. So going back quickly to the list, I was able to put in some of the information for Tier 3 Jean Grey, but not all of it yet. I don't know where her stat boost lands her. I imagine she's going to be top 5, but I don't have the numbers. I don't know if her Tier 3 skill has very high DPS. I just haven't been able to test that myself in terms of PvE content. PvP, obviously, it one-shots. I don't know if it's an iframe or if it has iframe ignore, so if anyone can offer video evidence of that, I would appreciate it. But she has one of the most unique Tier 3s in the sense that she gets 100% penetration. All the other Tier 3s, as you can see, they follow a pattern of 80% for a certain number of seconds. I mean, 3 seconds is pretty pathetic, but still, Captain America says hello. But she gets 100% for 9 seconds. She has the highest percentage on the second highest duration. The only one with the higher duration, of course, is Ant-Man, Thanos, and Captain Marvel, Sharon Rogers. So take that for what it is. But it is interesting. Now, she is going to have a very slow Tier 3 charge speed because the average cooldown of her skills, considering her third skill is a 25-second cooldown, naturally before skill cooldown gets calculated, is 14.4 seconds. So you can cut that down in half once you get 50% skill cooldown, but still it's one of the highest. It's only second to Captain Marvel, and we know how slow that one is to buff up to max. So if you have Tier 3 Captain Marvel, you can consider Jean Grey's Tier 3 skill to charge about as fast as that. You're not going to notice too much of a difference if it's less than a second off. And then she has 9 seconds of invincibility, but it's interesting, and I was looking at it again, since they changed her Tier 3 skill. So originally, if you guys read my patch note, or read the patch notes, or watched my patch note video, Jean Grey's Tier 3 skill then had a 70% self buff. So it had increased damage one time. And I believe that Deadpool has the same effect, except his is, where is it? Maximum effort. Yes, it's a 50% damage increase for 1 attacks. So she had a 70% damage increase for 1 attacks. But they decided to take it off. Now, whether they took it off to stoke the flames of Jean Grey being worse for PvE, or whether they took it off because it was an accident, genuinely, or whether they took it off because they realized through some last-minute calculation that she was going to be too strong, I don't know. But she does have the dubious award, among all of her non-dubious awards, of having the Tier 3 skill with the lowest number of buffs. Now, I'm not talking about debuffs. She has lots of debuffs. She has silence, bind, snare, whatever, stun, all this crap. But in terms of self-buffs, she has 2 types of penetration. She has the regular penetration and the fire immunity penetration, which is basically irrelevant. But then she also has invincibility. And that's it. She doesn't have iframe ignore, she doesn't have ignore dodge. She doesn't have, any of these meta buffs that any of these other Tier 3 skills have. I mean, look at these ones. You have a 7% heal, you have ignore dodge, you have all defense down, removes active buff. She doesn't have that. She doesn't have a damage reduction bubble. She doesn't have a summon. Well, Iron Man doesn't have a summon with his newest Tier 3, so we're going to have to take a look at changing this, but you can see what I'm saying. There's basically no other buffs that she has, so it is interesting. It does still leave her vulnerable to characters with very high dodge / very high guaranteed dodge, where those Ant-Man memes going up Jean Grey's butt. And then her tier 3 AoE is obviously high because it just burns up the whole arena. And then she's got a very high 1 to 5 average DPS, which is why level 60 Jean Grey can kill tier 3 Thanos with over 200,000 HP, and then I gave my recommendations for her best use. But those are kind of general ballparks on what I've seen, not what I've tested, so keep that in mind. But I think what the majority of this video is going to focus on is actually the distinction that I'm trying to make here. So I updated the new player tier 3 list that I think is pretty safe and pretty solid, but for PvE and PvP, it really starts to transform into a different kind of monster. Now, I didn't really touch the bottom. You can see like Wolverine, Ant-Man, Spider-Man, Black Panther, all those characters are pretty much at the bottom of either list because they really just don't have enough impact. I mean, you can definitely argue that Spider-Man has more impact than some of these characters for PvP, sure, but you're already, if you're already at your 10th tier 3, it's not really a big deal for you, and you probably don't need my advice, but it's really the top 5, the top 6 where things are different. Now keep in mind, for PvE, I did not put a super heavy emphasis on ABX because it just kind of skews things in a strange way, and it overvalues bad tier 3s like Magneto. So if you were talking about ABX specifically, you could almost make another list. I didn't feel like making one, but you could make a list that ignores Sharon Rogers and ignores Deadpool and just beelines straight for Captain Marvel, Luna Snow, and Captain America, because that covers a lot of the days. It covers 2, 4, 6, 7 different days, technically. And then you could work your way down to Iron Man, Magneto, and Thanos. Or Thanos, Iron Man, Magneto, in whatever order you wanted to kind of finish out the list, but it would just be a completely different list. But judging from a PvE perspective and taking into consideration the costs of these tier 3s, Jean Grey doesn't find herself at the top of either list, and neither does Thanos. Now the reason for that is they're just too damn expensive. You could tier 3 both Sharon Rogers and Captain Marvel instead of one of those other characters that I just mentioned, Thanos or Jean Grey. The fact that they cost double, or the fact that these other guys cost half, is much more meaningful for PvE than for PvP. That's why I'm much more comfortable putting Thanos and Jean Grey very high on the PvP ladder, because although they are very expensive, and again, you could amass multiple other tier 3s for PvP in that time, it really doesn't matter. And that's kind of the crazy thing about PvP. It's really you either have a chance or you don't. You know, if you tier 3 Black Panther and you tier 3 Magneto, that's great, champ. You take those two up against a tier 3 Thanos in PvP, your ass is grass. They're literally not going to provide any sort of benefit whatsoever. They're going to win you like 1 match out of 10. So the value of those characters is tremendously decreased. I would say everyone outside of like Captain America, all of these characters are almost useless for PvP, and honestly, it crushes my soul to say that Wolverine is useless for PvP. You know what? He honestly should be a little bit higher. This is what it should look like, I imagine, actually. But still, he's still out of the top 6, which means that what I said still stands. But, you know, regardless of that fact, there really is a huge difference. So comparing these two is really not the best idea, because you're not always going to get the bang for your buck. You tier 3 Thor, how's he going to perform in PvP? Not very well. Is he going to be banned some weeks? Probably not, and that's something else to take into consideration. I also considered whether the characters would get banned, and that's why, despite the fact that Captain Marvel might seem weaker to some people than Thanos or Jean Grey, she never gets banned in PvP, so you can use her every single week. I think that is by far why she takes the #1 slot, because she can kill Thanos, she can kill Jean Grey, so she can be #1, and she's never banned, so you can use her week in and week out without any interruptions to the value of your investment. So the return on your investment is just week after week of wins on top of wins for timeline. On the other hand, you have a situation. I don't think I set up the PvP list. Now that I'm looking at this, it seems as though I've made quite a few mistakes, and these characters are like pretty out of order, I would say, for PvP. So I'll just adjust it on the fly while I'm talking. But then on the other hand, for PvP, you definitely get a better, you definitely get a much better return on your investment, even for the lower end characters. You know, even if you're going to tier 3 let's say Magneto, he's not going to be your best character, and he's definitely a lot worse than Sharon Rogers, but he can still clear like a stage 40 World Boss Ultimate. He can provide a massive boost for you in ABX, and he can do basically any Shadowland stage, which, makes his value pretty reasonable. And then if you consider the fact that he costs half of the resources as Jean Grey, well, if you're only tier 3ing Jean Grey for PvE, should you tier 3 Jean Grey from PvE? Now, again, this is all taken in a bit of a vacuum, so you should consider everything. And obviously, if you completely ignore one side of the game, it does start to get a little bit skewed. I'm not saying Jean Grey is worse than Thor, but I'm saying that for the value of his tier 3 in terms of how much it costs, and tier 3 Jean Grey costs like 15,000 Phoenix Feathers and Emcron Crystals. It's absolutely insane. You're only going to get one World Boss Ultimate clear from both of these characters. And, from what I've seen, Thor can do pretty well with his new uniform, so you're probably not going to feel a huge gap between these two characters. Now, between Thor and Sharon Rogers, you are going to feel a huge gap, because Sharon Rogers just completely annihilates everything. She caps out ABX on the one day that she's available. She can go to basically any Shadowland stage because her damage is just through the roof, and Deadpool likewise. So while I think that the PvP list is a bit more top heavy for the top 6, and for them they're going to bring you lots of value every day, because they can literally net you 10 wins per day in timeline plus whatever value they give you in Conquest and Tournament and Battle World. On the other hand, for PvE, the top 2 or 3 are vastly superior in a lot of game modes, but you're still going to get a lot more value in general out of these characters just on a day-to-day basis, because you can use them in Shadowland, you can use them in World Boss, you can use them in all these different game modes, and then you could also use them in PvP. Whereas if you slap a CTP of Regen on Thanos, that is where he's best for PvP, but then you're going to kiss your ass goodbye for PvE. There's just no way you're going to be able to use Thanos for PvE with a CTP of Regen, so you're basically crippling that character's ability to do anything in this game mode, whereas in PvE, you can still use a lot of these characters for PvP, but, you're not going to make, having a really well-ranked PvE Sharon Rogers is not going to make her better on this list here. She's still going to be in the bottom tier, and that's just where she's meant to be. So this is more set in stone. This is a little bit more fluid based on your build. I'm still, of course, obviously assuming that you have the highest build for the character. So, well, what if you only have an obelisk? Well, then you're going to have to move the character's rank around. I don't think Captain America with an obelisk is going to be able to compete with Mr. Fantastic with an obelisk. Well, maybe he will. I don't know. I haven't tested it, but I'm assuming that you've got an optimal build with a CTP of Rage or a CTP of Thor Energy. And then likewise for PvP, I'm assuming you have an Authority, Regen, or just a very, very good obelisk like, max HP, 5 seconds guard break, or recovery rate, 5 seconds guard break. So let me know what you guys think of the new tier 3 rankings. I know I kind of did some of these PvP ones on the fly, but I think now that I look over them a few times, I think they make a lot more sense. It's really, it's a very top-heavy group for PvP, whereas for PvE, things kind of shake out a little bit more, and they really depend on whether you're just focusing on Shadowland and World Boss, or whether you're also integrating ABX, because if you're going to completely ignore ABX, Iron Man and Magneto take a big tumble down to the bottom, and Jean Grey and Thanos move up. But still, it depends on how you're going to gear the character out and what you want out of them at the end of the day, and whether you have the resources, because yeah, Jean Grey and Thanos are amazing tier 3s, and I wish everyone could have them, but given their cost, you really have to analyze how much they're bringing back for your account. How many times per day are you going to use Thanos tier 3? How many times per day are you going to use Jean Grey? If it's 10 times per day in World Boss or in Timeline Battle, that's great. Maybe you do want to pick up that character so that you can get more wins, so that you can get more crystals every week. If that's going to be an extra 20 or 40 crystals per week, that's going to add up. That's almost an extra 100 crystals per month. Yeah, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it'll add up over time. But if you're going to tier 3 a character who's banned 2 or 3 weeks out of the month, and then use them for PvE, maybe that's what you want to do. I don't know. It's up to you. But let me know what you guys think of both the PvE and PvP rankings. Poor Black Panther. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.